Hey, it's Jay, and it's time for me to talk about the sequel to Stanley Kubrick's The Shining, Dr. Sleep. So this movie came out this year, and it's very interesting. So let's get into the plot. In 1980, after the events of the Overlook Hotel, Danny and his mother Wendy have moved to Florida. However, Danny is haunted by past spirits of the Overlook Hotel, specifically the rotting old woman from room 237. However, through The Shining, Dick Halloran, played by Carl Lumbly in this movie, teaches Danny how to use these boxes to trap them in his mind using The Shining. So he's able to lock them away and kind of defeat them as they're continuously haunting him after the events that happened in the Overlook Hotel. At the same time, this group of vampires are feeding on children by murdering them and using their fear, which they call steam, to kind of remain immortal for a long time. They are led by Rose the Hat, played by Rebecca Ferguson, and they capture a girl. They lure her in with flowers because she seems to like flowers. They lure her in with flowers and then take her steam, which they do by killing them again, and then the steam will come out of their mouths and they just have to breathe it in or lock it in kind of like a thermos looking thing for later on. If somebody's weak or, falling ill, they can use that to rejuvenate themselves. So, very odd group of people that we got introduced to early on. So, cut to 2011, and Danny is now going by Dan, who is still traumatized by everything that's happened in his childhood and resorts to alcoholism, much like his father. He's a drifter, and he goes from town to town. He ends up in a small town where he befriends Billy Freeman, played by Cliff Curtis, who also becomes his AA sponsor. Dan is quickly able to get work as a hospice care worker, and he follows his cat around, and this cat is able to sense who's about to die. And whenever this cat enters somebody's room, that's when the patient knows that their time is coming. However, Dan uses his shining ability to comfort patients who are afraid of death, because let's be real, we're all afraid of death, and he uses his shining to pretty much tell them it's okay, you're not going to feel a thing, it's going to be painless, and you're going to be in a better state of mind, you're going to be in a better place than you being in this bed. And they give him the nickname of Dr. Sleep. So it's good that Dan is able to use his abilities to help people end their suffering. At the same time, he starts to kind of get this pen pal, this shining pen pal, who he doesn't know, but it's revealed to be a little girl named Abra Stone, played by Kylie Curran, and she communicates with him through his wall in his new apartment, and they're able to talk back and forth because they both have the ability to shine. So we'll have to see how this Abra girl compares to Dan in terms of her abilities to use the shining. I forgot to mention that Rose the Hat also recruits a girl by the name of Snakebite Andy, well that's what they dub her, to the True Knots after seeing her uncanny ability to telepathically control people to tell them to do whatever the heck she wants them to do. Think Kilgrave from Jessica Jones. If she wants you to go to sleep, you'll go to sleep. If she wants you to punch yourself in the face, you punch yourself in the face. She can tell you how to feel. It's very disturbing. And she puts two knife-like incisions that look like you just got bit by a snake, hence why she's called Snakebite Andy. So I forgot to mention that. She is now part of the True Knot group. Flash forward to 2019, and the True Knots are very, very starving. They haven't been able to find kids who shine as bright as they used to. They do have one victim, though, which is a little boy who plays baseball. And, everybody in the audience is talking about how he's, able to predict everything the pitcher's about to do. And they use Snakebite Andy to lure him into a van, and then they kidnap him and torture him brutally. It's a very, very brutal scene, and are able to take as much steam as they can to try to keep going because, again, they're starving. They haven't had enough steam in the past 8 years that have been able to sustain their slow aging process. In fact, one of the elder members of the group is slowly succumbing to his age because the steam hasn't been that powerful. However, we now learn how powerful Abra is, and she's able to witness the event using the Shining, and she screams, and this sends a burst through the True Knots as they're taking the steam from this poor boy, and they're like, whoa. And Rose the Hat's like, somebody was sitting in on that one. And they're like, nobody's been able to sit in on anything we've been doing. How is that possible? And Rose the Hat's like, I don't know, but we really have to keep an eye on this girl because she could be critical to our survival. So now Rose is a huge target by the True Knot. So Abra now knows that Rose the Hat is after her. And then she goes to find Dan. She skips school and goes to find Dan. But Dan is in no mood to help her at all. He's like, you need to stop. You got to stay away from these people. Do not draw attention to yourself. It will end up horribly for you. Rose the Hat astral projects herself into Abra's mind. But this is actually a really horrifying scene. Abra one-ups her and is able to trap her in this metaphysical world and actually gets into Rose's mind, thus wounding Rose because no one's been in her mind ever. And you could see her mind is filled. It's metaphorically shown that, you know, we have like kind of like files of all the memories. And since Rose has lived so long, she has just a catacomb of memories. And Abra's just searching through everything. It's actually a very, very creepy scene where this like form of Abra with no eyes is like slowly and creepily approaching Rose and it gets into her mind. It's really a disturbing scene. So now Rose the Hat has experienced just how powerful this Abra girl is, and she's horrified yet intrigued, and I think that kind of added fuel to her hunt to get this girl to fuel her cult even further. So the cat leads Danny to a room that isn't occupied by anybody, which confuses Dan until he enters and he sees another shine form of Dick Halloran, and he tells him, but before that, Dan almost traps Dick in a box, you know, the boxes that he showed him, which would have permanently locked Dick away for forever, and he would never get any visits from him. However, Dick informs Dan that he needs to help Abra, like, you have to do this. Because Dick's like, I came and helped you in your time of need in way back at the Overlook because I needed to. It was my duty to protect anybody else who has this ability, so you have to do the same for Abra. And so Dan accepts and he agrees, and he goes to meet Abra, who tells them that she could track the True Knot if she just touches Bradley's glove. Bradley was the baseball player who they captured and brutally murdered. So Dan enlists the help of Billy and tells him all about The Shining. Of course, Billy's a little skeptical because it sounds crazy that somebody's like, yeah, I can read minds, I can talk to people who are miles away, I can do all this crazy shit. And they go to the site that Abra was able to track down, and are able to dig up Bradley's now decomposing body and retrieve the glove. They bring it back to Abra, and she's able to sense where they are and where they're going. And they also enlist the help of Abra's father to, you know, help out in this situation. They lure the True Knots to this campsite in the woods, and using an astral projection of Abra are able to trick the True Knots, leaving Dan and Billy to open fire with rifles to kill most of the True Knot. Before Snakebite Andy dies, however, because she's also been hit by a gun, she tells Billy Freeman to kill himself, and as we know, she has the ability to tell you to do whatever she wants you to do, and you will do it. So Billy puts a bullet in his head with his rifle and ends up killing himself. So they killed a good majority of the True Knots, but one of our heroes succumbed to one of them as well. Yeah, so it was a good attack, but we lost Billy, which is not good. So Rose's lover, Crow Daddy, played by Zahn McLaren, outwits the team and goes back to Rose's house and kills her Abra's house and kills her father and drugs Abra to suppress her shining ability. Dan, however, finds a way to shine to Abra and is able to pull off moves that he never thought he could, and he possesses Abra's body and manipulates Crow Daddy to crash his vehicle, thus killing him and setting Abra free from the curse. Rose the Hat now sees that Abra is not afraid of her, and she consumes the rest of the steam that is in their little hideout, and now is very, very powerful. Her hand had been completely mutilated in the attack that Abra did in her mind, and she's able to heal all of her wounds and is now at full fighting force to come take on Dan and Abra. And Dan devises one location. There's only one location to bring them to have this final battle. And of course, that is the Overlook, because he feels that it is just as dangerous for Rose the Hat to be there as it is dangerous for Dan and Abra to be there. So they head to their final destination to have their final climactic battle. So Dan enters the Overlook and starts to awaken it by his presence. He also goes downstairs and turns the boiler on to max capacity. And again, this awakens the hotel. He enters the ballroom where Jack Torrance finally turned and tried to kill Danny and Wendy. He is given alcohol by Lloyd, the bartender, but Lloyd looks a lot like Jack Torrance, and Danny's not fooled by it. He's talking to him as if it was his father, and Lloyd's like, "I'm not your father, you must be confusing me with somebody else." And they're talking about how alcoholism had taken away so much pain in their life. You know, all the anguish they felt, just drink it all away. And when Dan does not succumb to the alcohol like Jack did in The Shining, he's able to overpower that ghost, but only that ghost. And he continues to find his way through the Overlook to have Rose the Hat come to them, because he also has Abra on lookout and pretty much tells him to shine to him when she's a mile away so that they can get this fight started and get their plan into motion. So once Rose comes to the Overlook, they trap her in an astral projection of the hedge maze from the climax of The Shining, and Abra is able to outwit Rose and get a couple of good licks on her with a knife. However, Rose starts to realize that she's not in Abra's mind, she's in Danny's. And after Danny fails to lock her in one of the boxes that he's been locking all these other ghosts in, she overpowers him and severs a very important artery in his leg and slowly starts to consume Danny's steam. So the only way Danny can defeat Rose is by unleashing the hatred and the tortured memories that he's been suppressing in his mind for all this time. He tells Abra to flee and unleashes everybody. The woman from 237, the two twins, the Come Play With Us twins, and every ghost that influenced his father to become this murderous monster, unleashed, and they overwhelm Rose and they kill her and they take her out. However, in releasing them, Danny also gave them the ability to possess himself. So now Danny is possessed and he is Jack 2.0 when he grabs an axe and chases after Abra exactly the way Jack chased him all those years ago, because his leg is damaged and he's got that hobbling run and he's going after Abra. Abra uses her extreme power to possess the possessed Danny to tell him that you're not a monster, you're a good guy, you're Dan Torrance, you're Uncle Dan, as she called him. And he's able to break free from the possession for just a bit to tell Abra to get out of the hotel. And he has only a few more minutes, because when he came into the hotel, he turned the boiler on and he put it to its max capacity so that it would overheat and explode. But the possession form of Danny takes over and tries to make it to the boiler to reverse that effect before it destroys the whole hotel, including all the ghosts that belong with it. Abra nearly escapes the hotel, as she is helpless to do anything but watch as the hotel burns to the ground. But right before the explosion, Danny sees a past version of himself being hugged by his mother, and that's the last thing he sees before he's engulfed by the flames. So it looks like Rose and the curse of the Overlook Hotel have finally been demolished. There won't be any more roses, but there still will be plenty more Abras, plenty more children who will shine. Hopefully that they use their abilities for good and not evil like Rose did. So Abra talks to Dan's spirit, much like Dan was talking to Dick's spirit throughout the whole movie. And, before he disappears, he also just tells her how, it's off screen, but he's told her now how to lock up these monsters, much like he did at the beginning of the movie, because they're not going to leave her alone. Abra's mother now comes to terms with Abra's abilities, as well as Abra telling her a message from her, the spirit of her father, that he is okay too. And he's able to communicate this because, she can read people's minds, even the dead's. And right before she goes down to dinner, she does what Danny did at the beginning of the film and sees the rotting old woman from room 237 and walks into the bathroom, closes the door, and locks that old woman in the box as well, just like Danny did at the beginning. And that was Dr. Sleep. Now, this is a good sequel. They handled it really, really well because, as you all know, The Shining, Stanley Kubrick's Shining, I should say, doesn't really follow the book, at all. It does in some aspects, but in most aspects it doesn't. The boiler was supposed to explode in The Shining, so I really like how they were able to incorporate that into this one, because you can't really fault Dr. Sleep for not following the book when its predecessor didn't follow the book. So they had to work with what they did, and I think they did a fantastic job incorporating elements of the first movie that were supposed to be in the first movie and bringing it to this one. How the Overlook was supposed to be blown up in the first one, they now blew it up in this one. So I like how they were able to adapt to that screenplay with what they were given. So anybody who's complaining that Dr. Sleep doesn't follow the book, I mean, neither did The Shining, but it's still a good movie, They had to work with what they did, and they did a great job. The performances by everybody were fantastic. Ewan McGregor as Dan was outstanding. You could really see the inner torture on his mind when he was an alcoholic, when he was going through AA, when he realized he can put patients to at ease in the hospice center, when he realizes he has to help Abra, everything he did, you could see the emotion in his face that he was a tortured soul. And I really loved Kylie Curran's performance as Abra. Very solid performance. She captured that childlike innocence. With having such a great power, she still captured what it was like to be a little girl. She was fun, she was playful, she was stubborn, and that was really well written. And Rebecca Ferguson, hat off, pun intended, for being Rose the Hat. She was able to capture that, crazed, psychotic person who needs to have this stuff to survive and is scared as hell when she realizes that she might not survive because people don't shine as well as they did before, and you could see the fear in her eyes as the elder of their group, dies because he succumbs to his age, and you could see that she's like, oh my god, everyone's next, including me. It's just really, really, really cool. The recasts in this film, because they obviously had to recast Danny, Wendy, and Jack from the previous film, they did a really, really solid job, and the woman who played Wendy really captured the awkward, breathy acting that the original actress who played Wendy did. She was really able to capture that. And the guy who played Jack captured the manic personality that Jack had towards the end of The Shining. Just super, super solid. They recreated Danny riding on his little tricycle through the Overlook from the first film almost perfectly, with the same atmosphere of, the quietness when he's on the rug and then the loud noise when he's on the hardwood and then back onto the carpet. They did a really, really good job with that. Everything about it, when you see the Overlook again, it's like, oh boy, here we go. Something's going to go down, obviously, because it's the Overlook Hotel. It's like an alive hotel. Note to self, never build a hotel on a burial ground. It's just not going to end well. Just everything about this film was super, super solid. This isn't a situation where you can see Dr. Sleep and get the same effect if you haven't seen The Shining, so I highly recommend you see The Shining before you go see this one. because then it's the weight of everything isn't going to make much sense. I know that there are some sequels that you can see without seeing the predecessor, but you do need to see The Shining before you see this one, because nothing will make sense, if you get what I'm saying. You won't understand why all these spirits are haunting Danny, or why the Overlook is such a scary place, if you haven't seen the first one. So definitely check that out before you see the sequel. And for all of you people who compare movies to books, don't, because it's not gonna match. It's not gonna match up for you. And I think it's unfair criticism when something doesn't match to a book. That's what gives it a crappy rating. I really don't think it should be judged based on that. So that's all I gotta say about people who really care about how movies adapt to the book, which I get, but don't make that the only thing you base the movie on. Base it on the shots, the cinematography, the performances, the scares, which this is one of my favorite types of horror movies, which is a psychological horror movie where the scares aren't in jump scares or, how gory it can be, but it's all in atmosphere. The Shining is a very, very scary concept. I'm talking about the movie. I'm not talking about the movie. I'm talking about The Shining. People being able to communicate like that and create metaphysical worlds and everything like that. That's scary. And even though most of the people in this movie are using it for good, it's still horrifying to think about that there are people like that in the world. I know there aren't, but I'm just saying in this world we've created with Dr. Sleep and The Shining. It's a scary thought, and just everything with the monsters coming back, the monsters who haunt this dude to drive him to alcoholism. It's scary. It's really, really scary. And that's why I think this movie is also extremely solid, with just the way they present this psychological, disturbed world that we are now finding ourselves in. And the introduction of the True Knots into this just adds to the creepiness, because the scene where they kill that poor baseball kid is just like, it was pretty brutal to watch, how slowly and painfully they kill this poor boy. It adds to it. It really adds to it, because they're killing him for one reason and one reason only. They have no remorse. They don't care about this kid's well-being or how his parents are going to take it or how anybody in life's going to take it. They just want his life force, which is really disturbing it's always disturbing when somebody kills somebody out of cold blood without any regards to how anybody else would take it. They just do it for their own personal gain. And it's just, everything adds to create an environment that will send chills down your spine, much like The Shining did way back when with Jack Nicholson. So it comes to my final verdict. This movie, in my book, gets a 3.5 out of 5 stars. Not better than The Shining. I still think The Shining is a little bit better, but this is a damn good follow-up to a damn good movie, so I highly recommend it, especially if you're a Stephen King fan. Remember, it's not going to match the book, but neither did The Shining, and if you like that, then you'll like this one too, regardless of its faithfulness to the original source material. So that's all I have to say. Make sure you guys stay tuned next week, because it is my #1 favorite film of all time. I can't believe we finally made it to this. I'm so excited to share with you guys what film I think is the greatest film of all time. So please like, comment, subscribe, share it with your friends, get this going, get the hype going for next week, because I can't wait to shoot it. I can't wait to get it all out for you guys. So with that said, that's a wrap, everybody.